Hello, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. It's about 3 minutes after the hour. Welcome to our webinar, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, a driving force for business, inclusive leadership, accessibility, and inclusion for all, part of a series that we're doing across America this year. Hello, I'm Andrea Smiley. I'm the Vice President of Public Relations for University of Phoenix. Just wanted to let all of you know I am not a panelist today, but I am so honored to welcome all of you and listen in along with all of you to this wonderful webinar that we have planned for you today. We are recording this session and we will make it available to any of you that would like to have it. We'll also post it on social media and on the University of Phoenix blog. We're so glad you're here today. Before we start, I do have some unfortunate news to share. Garish Ganesan with TD Bank, who was one of our panelists, is unfortunately unable to join us today due to a family emergency. Please keep him and his family in your thoughts. We have an incredible discussion ahead of us, but I want to take a moment to recognize our co-host Merck, as well as all of our incredible panelists who will introduce themselves in just a moment when we get started. But first, I want to set the stage a little. Today is Global Accessibility Awareness Day. It is an important day for so many reasons, and the pandemic we've been enduring over the last year has really put a spotlight on the importance of accessibility, especially after we were all pushed into a virtual world last spring. Global Accessibility Awareness Day was started in 2012 after a web developer, Joe Devon, wrote a blog post about how developers need to have more knowledge and awareness about accessibility. Jennison Asuran, an accessibility professional from Toronto, connected with Joe after reading the blog, and together they created Global Accessibility Awareness event. This International Day of Recognition is held annually on the third Thursday in May with the goal of raising awareness and getting folks talking about digital access and inclusion. As a society, we rely on print less and less in favor of digital and online content, and that content has to be formatted properly to allow all individuals to access it. For individuals with disabilities, it means we take steps to ensure that content is readable and can be navigated through a variety of means, including a keyboard instead of a mouse, and has text alternatives for graphical content that cannot be seen, just to name a couple of ways. Since September 2020, the University of Phoenix has accommodated over 8,800 students. Annually, approximately 25% of our student body disclose a disability though not all of them use the accommodations. That is because of how we structure our online courses to be inherently accommodating. We will provide accommodations like extended time for assignments and captioning of live meetings and lectures, and we do a lot of work with our instructional designers and subject matter experts to ensure that our course content is accessible and universally designed to meet students' needs. We are very dedicated and focused on our student outcomes and our student success for all of our students, which is why we have a team and processes in place to support our students who do need accommodations. As we were planning this event with Merck, we were curious about what others thought about accessibility in education and the workplace. So we commissioned a study of just over 2,000 Americans with the Harris poll, and here's what we learned. According to the survey, 33% of Americans said they either had or have a chronic medical condition or a disability. Additionally, 46% of employed adults have asked for at least one workplace accommodation due to a disability. With disabilities affecting so many, 82% of American adults see disability as an aspect of diversity. This belief is consistent regardless of if the person does have a disability or does not. Also, most Americans, 89%, believe companies should offer access and reasonable accommodations for their employees. So as you can see, today's conversation could not be more relevant or more important on this special day. And with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jane Oates, who will introduce herself and ask the panelists to do the same. Jane?
Andrea, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who's attending today, because the more we can get the word out about the important work that both the University of Phoenix and Merck are doing in this area, the more we change the world, right? So as Andrea said, my name is Jane Oates. I am the president of WorkingNation, which is a nonprofit media entity founded to completely devote itself to the stories of success transitioning from education to work. no surprise that I'm moderating this panel. The rest of my career has been mostly in government. I'm a special ed teacher by training and did that for over a decade, and then became a special ed researcher, mostly then on inclusion, and came here to Washington and joined the policy world, both in the Senate and then later as the head of higher education in New Jersey, and more recently as the Assistant Secretary of Labor for Employment and Training in the Obama administration. But after the Obama administration, I went to the University of Phoenix, where I shared in some of the things that Andrea is doing. I was in the External Affairs Division, and I headed up corporate social responsibility, which is a great segue to say, let's meet our amazing panel, leaders in education and in industry. And I am going to let them introduce themselves. Stephen Fremill, Kelly Herman, and Nora Velli. Stephen, why don't you start? We'll go in alphabetical order.
Okay, certainly. Thank you. Steve Fremill. I have dark hair, tan complexion. I'm wearing a blue blazer and a black shirt. And I'm from Merck Pharmaceutical. And over the last couple of years, I have put together with a lot of input from across the organization, a framework that we call enterprise digital governance. And one of the work streams underneath this includes digital accessibility, and some very exciting work that we can get into as we go forward. But that is, that is one area of my life, and another in parallel is also as a music professor for the last over 25 years.
Oh, thank you. Kelly?
Thanks, Jane. My name is Kelly Herman. I am a white woman with red hair wearing glasses and a plum-colored shirt today. I am the Vice President of Accessibility, Equity, and Inclusion for the University of Phoenix. And so my team is responsible for some of the work that Andrea highlighted for us earlier in terms of how we work with students. But I also have responsibility for our Accessibility and Usability Office, where we do a lot of technical review and evaluation of the content that comes out, both on our public website as well as any of the infrastructure that we use at the university, and then also in our curriculum. And I also work with our Educational Equity Office, which is focused on our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies for students, and a lot of our community partnerships. And so I'm thrilled to be here today.
Thank you so much. Nora?
Hi, everyone. I'm Nora Velli, and I am the Executive Director of Global Diversity and Inclusion at Merck. I wear a couple of hats in that role, and one that I'm really excited about to share with you today is that I lead the company's Global Disability and Inclusion Strategy Council. I've been with the company for several decades, and I've had the opportunity to focus on all of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So I look forward to our conversation.
Well, thank you very much. And I hope all the attendees agree. Stellar panel. So to kick us off, I think that when Andrea said the numbers that they found in the Harris University of Phoenix poll, I was stunned. The numbers are just amazing. And as we look at people of varying abilities, let's talk a little bit about what your organization has done to address accessibility. Let's start first with employees, and then we'll move on a little bit. But I don't know, Steve, you want to start that?
Well, I might punt this one over to Nora from the space that Nora works with, but I can say that one of the things that, and in fact, I think today was a big rollout at Merck for digital accessibility. But one of the things that is included in our initiative is working with our employees to better understand the opportunities in their daily tools, their Office 365, where they can make use of accessibility features, whether it's your PowerPoint or Outlook, or maybe it's putting together a PDF correctly so that it can be read by an assistive technology tool. And so, you know, working with our employees, so this is all our employees, working with them to better understand our everyday tools of which we all use. Nora, any
yeah, I was going
follow-up?
to say, Nora, let's shift to you, but I think, Steve, you did a great job setting her up.
Sure. So we've been on this journey for quite some time, and I would say that back in 2015, our Center of Excellence, which is Global Diversity and Inclusion, we had commissioned a organizational assessment that was focused on disability equality in the workplace. And as a result of that assessment, we formed what is known today as the Global Disability and Inclusion Strategy Council. This council enabled us to accelerate our efforts and develop a comprehensive ecosystem of workplace accommodation, support, and inclusion so that we could be sure that everyone could contribute to their full potential. It was the work of the council that really led us to focus on digital accessibility. At the time, we considered this body of work to be focused more around information technology. And over the years, what we discovered was that this was bigger than just IT. And so Steve was leading the enterprise digital governance framework. And I met him through various connections who were helping me to identify who was it in the company that I needed to speak to so that we could really begin to have momentum in advancing digital accessibility at Merck. And so, as Steve mentioned, the last couple of years, we have really accelerated and moved this forward at Merck. And it was through our collaboration and being able to work together to do this and to raise awareness. And ultimately, today, we announced the launch of a global policy. So it's a very exciting day for us.
Well, congratulations on that. I just want to dig down a little bit, just because I'm trying to guess what people would ask, but this is a good moment for me to say, put your questions in the chat. You as attendees, your questions are the most important. But the question that came up to me, Nora, when you talked about forming this council, who are the important people? You know, I don't mean by names, but who are the people in an organization that need to be on this kind of council in order to make it work?
So when we did the organizational assessment, we looked at each of the areas where we were assessing how well we were doing and where there was an opportunity to do better. So an example of the areas that we focused in on were, I mentioned already, information technology. We looked at the built environment. We looked at facilities management. We looked at our health and benefit offerings, our talent acquisition process. We engaged with labor relations because we have a unionized environment at some of our locations. So we wanted to make sure that they were included. We looked at supplier diversity, and we also looked at how could we build the capabilities of our organization to be more disability confident. So as we assessed all of these areas, it organically formed into the council because we invited the leaders, the decision makers, the folks that were touching these areas of assessment, and we brought them together to have a report out on our findings. And as a result of that, we then designated or nominated or voluntold them that we wanted them to be part of this council. And from there, they went out and built a 5-year strategic plan to address the things that we identified that we wanted to address.
Well, I promised to let you off the hook soon, but Alfred had a question in the Q&A asking very specifically, was there a policy launched today, a global policy launched today at Merck? And if so, what was it?
There was a global policy that was launched today. And Steve, I'm going to punt it back to you because
It's only
have a lot
fair.
to
Right?
share.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Why not? Well, and this is something that, you know, for 2021, you know, we're considering the entire year a phased launch, where last year we took the time to do our due diligence in 2020, since we all had extra time to work extra hours, took the time to get our due diligence to understand where should this policy sit within the organization, what you know, are there considerations around you know, supplier management that was mentioned already, and really working with a cross-organizational working team from designers and developers and folks out of legal and compliance, and of course the business, the commercial and marketing business, and really cross-organizationally putting together this policy, getting the input, the expertise, the policy and the standards, the WCAG Web Content Accessibility Guidelines standards, 2.1 AA. The procedures, how is this going to work within our existing systems development lifecycle? So really taking the time throughout last summer and into the fall, really understanding where best to position this. And then as we came into first quarter of this year, you know, tightening up a few things, getting our signatories lined up. Really, we had some markets who are already moving forward with the policy. They knew what the standards were. They weren't going to change. The procedures, we all understand our systems development lifecycle, or mostly, and you know, mapping that to those existing policies and procedures. And really, as we're going forward from today, it's the communications plan across the globe for this policy. And so this is very exciting. I consider this this is a big campaign, right? So we've taken steps to work with our global learning and development to develop awareness training. Another round of training on the roadmap would be a role-based training if you're a designer or a developer or a business owner. And additionally, working with our creative studios and putting together an illustration to really kind of brand this this initiative. I think if you're going to mobilize a global workforce, there's got to be some sort of branded, and it's tough to use the word brand in the pharma industry because all of our medicines are considered brands. So it's tough to use that, but to have a branded effort where when someone sees an illustration of digital accessibility, they know what it means, and it's you know, that's how we're rolling this out, to think of it as a branded sort of campaign. And it's you know, very exciting to see where all the pockets of practice of digital accessibility are happening. And so part of this also is to, with such a large company, you can bet for sure that we have a lot of siloed activity. That's just the nature of a very large global company. So putting together a community of practice where those who are practicing, those subject matter experts can convene. Those who are new to the subject can join, learn best practices, get ideas, tools, and tips, and how to implement this in their respective part of the organization or in their country, in their local market. So, you know, a lot of pieces to all of this. And of course, this is applicable across the entire company, not just within the commercial and marketing space, but also in the research laboratories, the manufacturing, the corporate and internal not just external facing websites and digital assets, but also internal. And like I mentioned, to come full circle, how we operate in the digital landscape, which is most of what we do today anyway, so it touches everybody.
Thank you so much. Kelly, you are not off the hook. I want to take that question to you and say, you know, what has the University of Phoenix done to address accessibility? Let's try first for your students, because that 8,000 number was pretty impressive.
Yeah, and that number keeps growing. And I think, you know, we're really proud of that number too, because a lot of students tend to gravitate towards online learning because, you know, there are so many different ways that it's inherently accommodating, you know, for the needs that they have. But I think, you know, for us, you know, it's been, yeah, I would say pretty similar, you know, in terms of how Merck has approached it is how the University of Phoenix has approached it as well. It's really important when you're looking at policies and procedures that you find ways to bake accessibility into your development and what those processes are that are existing and where you can kind of tweak and modify a little bit so that you can be more intentional with how you address accessibility so that you're not, you know, making something too, you know, overly cumbersome or, you know, that folks aren't going to follow, because a policy that doesn't get followed doesn't actually achieve your goal of why you put a policy in place in the first place. So there's a couple of things that you know, I think have been really key for us, and that has been working really closely with our procurement office and making sure that as we're, you know, going out to suppliers, you know, that we're clearly communicating to them that we have accessibility standards that we follow and that we are going to do an assessment of tools and products and services that we're looking at, you know, purchasing, that we're going to assess them for how they meet, you know, the web content accessibility guidelines that Steve mentioned earlier, how they meet those guidelines and where, you know, they might be falling a little bit short. I think one thing that we always remind ourselves when we do this with our colleagues internally, but also with those external vendors that we work with, is that accessibility is a journey. It's not a destination. There's not going to be this point of nirvana, we've arrived, we don't have to focus on this anymore, because every product goes through an iterative cycle where there's new, you know, features that are developed and things are launched and released. And every time that happens, you have the opportunity to make it better, and you also have that opportunity to make it worse. And so we always have to be on top of that and build that assessment of where we are with accessibility into those standard procedures so that everyone kind of knows what's going on, what's happening, and most importantly, probably, that we don't slow down the process. I mean, I think when I first arrived at the university about 4.5 years ago, it was, we're on board, we want to do this is really important to us, but don't slow us down. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But that means you got to kind of jump into this pool and swim with me, because we all have our lanes. And, you know, it's important that you don't forget, you know, lane 1 or 8, just because it's on the outside of the pool, and we focus on lane 4 because that's where the fast swimmers go. You know, all lanes are important. And so, you know, having that stakeholder buy-in, making sure that you're building it into those regular processes and assessing, how is it working? You know, does everyone have the knowledge and the expertise and the background information to know why this is important? And, you know, so that they're committed to it. And I think we've done a really good job of that. Is it perfect? No, but nothing ever will be. But, you know, we're all committed to the same message, which is this is important to us. You know, as we've switched, you know, some of our approach to IT development for the resources that we, you know, create both for our students and for our faculty and staff, embedding accessibility into those and making sure that as, you know, they're adhering to these agile release methods, that, you know, we're iterating on accessibility at the same time that we're iterating on the other features has been critical, as have been the professional development and the support. And one way that, you know, we've done that, I'll just highlight really quickly, is, you know, we've partnered with 24 different volunteers across our IT and marketing organizations who wanted to develop more accessibility expertise, and they've become our accessibility SMEs. And so they've gone through a 4 or 5 month training program with my team as they've, you know, deepened their knowledge and awareness of accessibility principles, and they're building it into their work. And we've kind of likened it to, you know, when they would come to my team before and they'd get back their papers with red ink all over it. Steve, as a music professor, you probably have experience of doing that to your students, right? It's not always the best user experience experience on the other end. And so we wanted to kind of figure out how we could embed this in even more organically to what it is that we do. And so by having the accessibility SMEs now on 18 of our different agile release trains as we organize the work, it's spread the wealth across the organization so that there's more than just the accessibility experts on our team talking about it. There are other developers and website, and content developers who are talking about this and embedding that into the work that they do right out the gate, which, then makes it a more accessible ecosystem all the way around.
So Kelly, let me just go back as a follow-up. I'm sure there are some educators on the call today and some that will listen. And we just lived through the COVID implementation of what was supposed to be online learning for so many, not like the experts that do it at Phoenix. But what did you do with faculty? How do you continually work with your faculty, both for adaptations that they might need so that you can get a richer diversity in your faculty, but also getting them to understand that the adaptations are not diluting their instruction?
Oh, and that's a constant conversation. And I almost said struggle, and that's the wrong word, because, the faculty are doing the best that they can in the environment within which they have to work as well. And so many of them, because we use practitioner faculty at the University of Phoenix, because we want them to bring in that real world career relevant education to our students and to share that, haven't always been exposed to, accessibility and accommodation information that you will find with more traditional faculty at, other institutions. So it's a constant partnership with our faculty, and our human resources office, handles all of our employee related accommodations. But that doesn't mean that faculty don't come to my team and say, hey, I've got this going on too. How can you help me? And so we kind of try to, figure out how can we be a bridge, from what the faculty is telling us that they need, whether they need accommodations for themselves and, making sure that they get them. But sometimes it really is more they need that subject matter expertise that my team can provide on what does an accommodation mean? What does it mean for that student without necessarily divulging private information that we shouldn't be sharing with them, but rather, kind of making it clear to them that this isn't something that we're doing to give the student a free pass, right? A student with a disability is entitled to an accommodation because, we have vetted that information. We've determined that this is reasonable. And there's a little bit of trust that you have to have in our ability to do that and the guidance that we provide to you in terms of how to implement those accommodations in your courses. And we're happy to have those conversations, but also on creating accessible content. So, we have, thousands of faculty who are working with thousands of students, and it's really, really critical that they are an important cog in the wheel, because otherwise it's going to fall apart if we don't provide them with the appropriate support and professional development so that they can create accessible materials when they share them with students. And so for us, we, not only foster individual relationships between our disability services advisors who work specifically with students, they also work with faculty. We have two major constituents, that we're concerned with, but also we provide annual training opportunities for our faculty. And we try to keep it as practical and timely and relevant to what it is that we're asking them to do in short nuggets. So last summer, our accessibility training was on how to write effective alternative text descriptions. We have a requirement that our faculty share images that have effective alternative text descriptions. Well, that's a great requirement. But if no one has written one before, and I don't know if any of you have sat down to try to figure out how to do that effectively, it's not easy. It's not as easy as it sounds. And there's a nuance and an art to it. And so we developed an hour-long asynchronous training and rolled that out to our faculty and said, this is how we'd like you to think about doing this. And, providing that support, providing one-on-one consultation with an accessibility expert so that the faculty can feel supported in what it is that we're asking them to do. Because it's not enough to say, this is our policy, you have to do it. We actually have to support them in being able to do that if we want it to be effective.
Boy, two words, you said so many great things, Kelly. Two words that I'm walking away with are trust and support. I think that those are such important words. Now we have a question, Steve and Nora, this is going to go back to you in our Q&A from Kirsten, that asks if you have, how do you determine what tools to use to make the workplace more accessible for your workers? Is there a way? Her question is exactly, how do you determine or assess what tools to use to improve employee accessibility at Merck?
Well, I think you think about the tools that everyone at Merck is using. Again, I'll go back to Office 365. And we actually have the Microsoft account team currently involved in determining what are some of those features that they can turn on and off for accessibility. What are the training modules that are already in existence? What can we leverage that Microsoft has already done? And it's really starting with first that awareness with, for example, PowerPoint. Knowing that you can go to the, I'm looking over here at my PowerPoint screen here. If you go to the, the review tab, there's an accessibility checker, and you can turn it on and click on it, and it'll show you, the areas of opportunity for you. Do you know that if you're presenting a PowerPoint with a slideshow tab, and you're presenting to a global audience where the English language may not be their mother tongue, that you can turn that on, and you're presenting your PowerPoint, you can have instant closed captioning based on what you're saying. Also on that same feature, if you're presenting to an audience of a different language, but you're speaking in English, you can do the closed captioning in their language while you're speaking English. It's pretty cool. So it's really like any technology, any platform. You know what you know to do your job, and you don't know what you don't know. And when you need to figure something out, you Google it and you figure it out, and now you have another skill. So because Office 365 is enormous, I don't think there's anyone on the planet who knows how to do everything on any one of those platforms. So we're starting, and you can't boil the ocean, but you can cup by cup. So we're starting with just that very basic, what are those few things that you need to know to be able to use Outlook or PowerPoint, or whether it's a virtual event platform such as MS Teams or WebEx. What are those basic things? And starting with that and creating that awareness, because when it comes to, if you're a technology company, and if you're gonna be relevant, it's incumbent upon you to ensure that your tools, your platforms have accessibility in it, because this is the rising tide. And so large companies have recognized that, some time ago. So that's why Microsoft is leading. That's why Google is leading. That's why Adobe is leading. And so the tools that most of us use every day have those features and functions. It's just including that into our wherewithal and understanding and how to use them. So, Nora, I don't know if you have any.
The only thing I would add is that for the average user, taking that approach helps us to really build the confidence that we want employees to have in order to be able to use these features. For those that are in the technical space, though, there are other kinds of tools that they're using to assess deeper in terms of what's needed. And that's not something I have an answer to, because they're in the technical unit and this is, what they know. But there are tools out there that provide that assessment of how, let's say, your website, how accessible is your website, or other kinds of platforms. And I think if you go out on the internet and you search, for keywords on website accessibility, you'll find vendors popping up all the time in terms of offering services.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully lots more as we all get more deliberate about this.
And if I could add one more thing to that. So yes, certainly there are vendors and services out there. There's a lot of automated testing tools to determine whether or not at what degree does your website, pass per se. However, those automated tools really account for only 25 to 30% of the criteria. And so it's that next step where you have actual manual user testing done by individuals with disabilities to really flesh out the full criteria of if a website is accessible.
Yeah. And the one thing that I would add to that too, Steve, is, there is the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, the IAAP, and they have developed, various certification exams for accessibility professionals. So if someone, sitting in the audience today is thinking, I want to learn more about this, I want to learn more about what I can do, I would direct you, first and foremost to the IAAP to look at, some of the various criteria that they're assessing in terms of those certification exams. That will give you a really good starting point in terms of what is some of that content that I need to know. Because I think one of the other things that we found in our survey, and we know it doesn't necessarily happen in a lot of our academic programs, is, that, our respondents felt that, this was something that was really important for college and universities to be teaching our students, especially those who are in the computer science fields. And that's something that, we are intentionally looking at, at the University of Phoenix, and how we can infuse this into our curriculum. And there are organizations that are out there that are partnering with industry that are, set up to try to help us to do that. But when we have to, start to fix some of that knowledge gap so that we can be, not only developing, that talent and that, upskilling the folks who are wanting to go into this field, because it really is going to be the most effective when we build it into everything that we build. So even if it's not, a tool that's specifically marketed for use with, somebody who has a disability, if you think about all of the various voice assistants and, all of the new technology that we all use every single day on, how many things are built into these silly little devices that we have, attached to, to our hips and, barely do anything without. There are a lot of accessibility features that we all find really convenient, even if we don't have that sort of a disability, that, are becoming more and more in favor and more in use every day. And so I think we really do have a responsibility. We're kind of at a tipping point right now in terms of we've gotten by people being really entrepreneurial and intrepid and going out and looking at this information. But I think, the main reason that, Global Accessibility Awareness Day started 10 years ago was because there wasn't enough awareness that this is something that actually had to be done and programmed into websites. And when you think about our world now, it's not just websites, our digital ecosystem is huge. And so I think we have a responsibility to look at that and to figure out, how do we ask the right questions? How do we put our vendor and, supplier partners on notice that we're going to ask the right questions to make sure that you are thinking about not only your roadmap and the ecosystem of your product, but that you're actually including accessibility as part of that. Because one of the things that we talk about at the University of Phoenix is that we may know in our employee pool right now is a pretty well-known entity in terms of who has various disabilities, who have asked for accommodations. And while we might not have anyone on staff right now who happens to be blind within our IT department, that doesn't mean that that won't change tomorrow. And so we have to be prepared for that. And if we're procuring technology today that might need to be used by someone, whether we hire that someone or someone has something happen that they lose part of their sight, we want to be prepared for that, because that person will still need to be able to do their job. So let's ask our suppliers the right questions. How are you accessible? Well, what standards are you mapping to? And get some information from them about the development, especially of those accessibility features.
Such an important point, Kelly. Because disability is non-discriminatory. It can happen to anyone at any time, and certainly as we all stay in the workforce longer, it increases the opportunity that we will have changes in at least vision and hearing, if not other things. So excellent, excellent points. I have to go back to you, Nora, because I could have warned you about this as soon as you talked about the council. Now we have another question about related to the council. Katie wanted to know if you could share any lessons learned from setting up that council that other people who now are going to steal that idea, I hope, could use in getting there faster.
So I think one lesson I learned was that you need to meet people where they're at. I had high aspirations when we launched the council and wanted to move very fast in achieving, the priorities that we had set through the strategic plan. What I learned along the way, though, is that not everyone is there. Not everyone has the knowledge to be able to accelerate. And so you need to take a step back, and you need to lock arms with them and walk with them and help them. And so I guess it was maybe the second year into the work we were doing, I realized that I needed more one-on-one time with each of the work stream leaders. And we talked about their own gaps in terms of what they needed to learn more about. How could we connect them to the right partners, the other folks within our network that were subject matter experts, or companies that were leading in this specific area that they were focused on, that they could learn from. And so that was the approach we took in year 2. I think you have to be realistic about what it is you're trying to achieve and what the goals are that you're setting for yourself, because in some companies that are starting this journey, there could be really audacious goals that you're trying to achieve, and you may get frustrated in the process because change takes time. And so that's what I learned. I think by the time we got to the 4th year, we were ready to move on talent acquisition, for instance. We had initially gone into this thinking we would include talent acquisition as part of the priorities we were setting, but we realized if you don't have a strong infrastructure, and Kelly, you're talking a lot about that infrastructure and that ecosystem, if it's not strong, then all the recruiting that you're trying to do won't be successful for the individual you're recruiting into the organization. So we took our time with that, and then we knew when the time was right for us to move forward and be more aggressive there.
Thank you. And we have a question from Bianca, and I think this can go to anybody. I mean, clearly Merck is a leader in corporate America in this field, and the University of Phoenix is in the world of education. But some of the people attending today may need to have this be a bottom-up move, not a top-down move. So the question that Bianca asked is about, do you know any tutorials or programs that an individual could take a look at to build their own knowledge base on this, hopefully so they could then bring it forward in their company or in their college? Any online resources?
So in addition to the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, as I mentioned before, I would also say that it really does depend on what it is that you're looking to develop, your awareness of. So there are so many resources that you can kind of put out, you put out there and go find some things. If you're looking specifically for, how do you format digital content and, web resources, one of my favorite, places to send folks, because it's a very comprehensive web resource, is WebAIM, which is Web Accessibility in Mind, which is, run by Utah State University. And so you just Google Web AIM, if I can speak here this morning, that would be a place where I would send folks, to get some basic, awareness of, the digital content and accessibility. I think it depends on what specifically it is that you're looking for, because there are so many other resources that you could go to as well. But WebAIM would be one of my first and top choices, to send someone to start.
The other resource that we used in the early part of our journey was partnering with the Office of Disability and Employment Policy. They have a significant amount of resources that you can tap into, and there is one resource within ODEPT that's called the Partnership on Employment and Accessible Technology. So I would say that, if you go out and Google on ODEPT, odep.gov, it'll bring you to a menu of choices, and you can explore what's out there on their website.
I hope that was helpful. It was certainly was helpful for me, and I put both of those into the chat if you didn't catch them, so that you can write them down and follow up with them later. I'm a big fan of ODEP as well, Nora. It's a wonderful, small but mighty part of the Department of Labor. So let me shift gears a little bit and ask you about how your organization really took action to create a more diverse talent pool. Usually when we talk about diverse talent pool, we're talking about gender and race, we're talking about age, but adding variant abilities, different abilities there is challenging. And I think I talk for everyone when I say we'd all like to hear it. And Kelly, if you would put your hat on as an employer at the University of Phoenix for this one.
Sure. Do you want me to start, Jane?
Please.
Since you called me out, I'll go back on the hot seat here for a second. I think, for us, it's been, being very intentional about looking at the entire process of, talent acquisition. And, we've consulted with our HR group, quite a bit in terms of what does that mean, to make sure that, everything that we do is, welcoming, and that, folks can feel that they belong here, and that we do think through some of the logistical concerns that would come up from, someone who has a disability, who has to think about how are they going to advocate for themselves in terms of a reasonable accommodation. And so some of the things that we've done, and this has been some of the work that my team in our educational equity office has done quite a bit of as well, is, really been looking at the community relationships and the partnerships that we've been building, so that we can be, partnering with those organizations in our communities where, we would like to draw, applicants from, and making sure that, the University of Phoenix is being seen as a trusted employer, and a place where folks could come and, actually find a home here in terms of, their employment search. And so we've looked at, working with them not only from a business to business model, and, being able to say, hey, we have, some opportunities here for your employees to take courses, and what could that look like, but also, hosting job fairs and, career fairs. And, I'm sure many of you who are sitting in the audience today have seen one of our commercials, and where we're talking about, the new career university and our career with confidence, that we really are talking, to our students first and foremost about how their degree is going to impact, their career journey. And so we are trying to translate that as well into what can we do to increase the diversity of our talent pool by, being careful about where we post for jobs. Our talent acquisition, office is staffed not only with folks who kind of manage the back end things of the logistics of postings and whatnot, but also sourcing specialists who go out and look for and meet with each one of us as hiring managers to talk about what it is that we're looking for, and where can they find those applicants for the jobs that we have. And so while it's not an area that I have direct responsibility for, we do work with them quite a bit. And I think it's something that we're trying to be an organization that honors and respects the diversity of all of our employees, including those with disabilities, and how can we best support them.
That's great. Team Merck.
So I can talk a little bit about the approach that we took to employment. We realized that we needed to think about employment from a three-pronged approach. Direct hiring, meaning that you're hired into Merck as an employee. Indirect hiring, meaning that you're coming through a temporary or contractor agency to work on projects in the company. And then the third prong was through our supplier diversity engagements. We found that by having this three-prong approach, we were actually creating economic inclusion for people with disabilities through each of the channels. One of the things that we experimented with, and this was during the early part of our journey where we weren't activating a specific talent acquisition strategy, we had experimented with social media. And by that, I mean, we went out and we began to do different things on social. We had a Twitter chat with someone who is known in the disability community, who we hosted this event to talk about disability inclusion. And within 24 hours, we had almost 2 million views on that Twitter chat. It was incredible. We had done some feature stories about students that we had brought in for the summer, or co-ops, and we talked about deaf culture. And we found that by posting these kinds of stories, we were actually attracting talent to the company. Then we experimented with something that was aligned to Disability Mentoring Day, which is generally held during the month of October each year, and it's through the American Association for People with Disabilities. What we had done was we met students during the summer that were part of the Disability In conference. They were next gen leaders. And we identified these students that we wanted to invite in who were pursuing degrees in STEM. And we hosted a leadership development day for them. And what was really unique about this day was that it was held during their winter break. So we needed to figure out what was in it for them to take the time to come in during their break and meet with our leadership team. And so we hosted this event where we offered them sessions on personal branding. We taught them about some of the things that we were doing with 3D printing or virtual reality training modules. And then we did one-on-one interviews with the various leaders from the disciplines that they were pursuing so that they could get to know them and they could get to experience what it was like to be at Merck. After that event, I think we had 3 offers that the leaders wanted to make based on that interaction with the students. And so I was a firm believer that we needed to create an experience for the leadership and the hiring managers, and we needed to create an experience for the students. So that was just one example of, things that we were doing to attract the talent. I shared, recently that what we noticed based on the work we were doing in the social space, the work we were doing to really bring in students in a different kind of way than we might have done in the past, we saw an 86% increase in the recruitment of professional level talent. It was unbelievable to us. We were finding, candidates were identifying as someone with a disability. We were measuring, the conversion of the candidates to hires. And when we took a hard look at where were we hiring, we found that it was within the professional level, and quite frankly, it was at a senior specialist, associate director level. So we were so excited to see, the impact we were having.
Boy, that's so impressive. Steve, did you want to add anything there?
Well, I think being in the enterprise digital governance, not a whole lot of visibility as yet into the talent acquisition. So, but I leave that to Nora.
Well, I bet when we follow up with you in the near future, that will change, because it
Yes.
seems to me you're going to have a part in every aspect of Merck's business. They seem to recognize talent. But I think, Nora, that was such a great point to make, that I think many employers think that this is like a social good to hire, by the way, broadly diverse talent. And they don't realize the additional plus it is in terms of your talent, that there is a business reason for really making the effort to hire diverse talent. So I'm so glad you brought that up, that it wasn't the lowest level, entry level positions where you were using this diverse talent pool. It was all over the enterprise. Congratulations. That's such an important point to make. So I want to go back to something that to bring up something that might be unpleasant. And maybe this was just in government, but accommodations, and you'll hear this from small business owners, are sometimes expensive, right? And it means that you have to take the money, especially for those smaller employers or for colleges and universities, away from someone else. The pie doesn't get bigger in order to accommodate new talent or new students. So the question really is, could you talk a little bit about how your current employees reacted to your real efforts here, you know, to be more inclusive? And have you seen anything that you think should be brought to people's attention in terms of the way those employees reacted? Or
So
students,
So
Kelly?
I can start with this because I think I had been here in at the university for about a month, and you know, everyone, you know, had we had just come out of a resolution agreement with the Office for Civil Rights around digital accessibility, and folks knew, you know, widely across the university that, you know, I had been hired, and you know, it was a bigger thing than I kind of, you know, thought was going to be when I started going into meetings. They were like, "Oh, Kelly's here, ask her any questions." And, you know, whether this was the right move or not, I said, you know, I'm happy to answer any questions. I kind of approach questions, you know, from the standpoint of I'm Vegas, you know, so what you ask me stays with me. You know, I happen to do confidentiality really well. And I was not counting on folks really taking me up on that. And one of our program deans, who's no longer with the university, but completely unrelated, said to me, "Yeah, when is accessibility going to go away? I'm kind of tired of this stuff." And I was like, "Oh, all right, we have a real moment here. Let's see how much of New York Kelly comes out versus really nice diplomatic Kelly." But I was really, actually, I was really glad that she asked me that question, and you know, because it gave me a really good window into how folks were feeling about this, and they were feeling like they totally understood why it was important for the students, but they also felt like this was a pretty heavy burden that they felt was stifling innovation. And we needed to flip that. We needed to flip that thought process on its head, because accessibility is not a reason to be less innovative and creative. It's a reason to be more innovative and creative. And we just needed to kind of shed some of the woe is me, this is not fair, you know, we are being forced into this, and really see it as an opportunity. And that takes time, and it takes trust, and it takes relationship building. And so, you know, coming back to some of the things I said, you know, earlier about building that trust and being reasonable. I think, you know, Nora, I loved how you talked about, you know, the story, you know, at Merck, in terms of you had really audacious goals. And it's important to have audacious goals, but it's also important to recognize where you can go fast and you can hit the accelerator, and when you need to hit the brake a little bit, or maybe you can coast a little bit more, because you can't leave people behind, and you need to understand what it is that they're struggling with. And so do we hear a lot about, oh my gosh, you know, you have another student who's deaf, and it's going to cost us how much for captioning? Yeah, of course we hear that, because, you know, there are some folks whose job it is to look at the bottom line. And then it's my job to say, okay, how do we balance that out? And, you know, what can we move forward from on a strategic level versus, you know, we have to take care of the store now. And so maybe there are some things that, you know, have to be moved from a strategic fund to an operating fund, because, you know, we have to meet our students where they are. But I think one of the things that has been really key for us, and this is unique, I think, in higher ed, but I mean, Nora has some amazing statistics about what they've been doing at Merck. But for us, it's been really important to kind of highlight that we know that students with disabilities are an at-risk group in terms of, you know, their retention and their persistence to graduation. And so it became really important that we talked in the same way about the effectiveness of what it is that we're doing with our leaders. So if, you know, my colleagues in student services are talking about retention rates and graduation rates, then I have to figure out, how do we measure that for students with disabilities? And we did. We started to measure our retention rate. And so when we look at retention for us, we define it on a 30-day rate from a student who had been in class 1 month to then 30 days later, are they still posting attendance in the next class? And when we accommodate a student, we see a 10 to a 15% jump in that retention rate over the university's, you know, general retention rate. I'm not going to bring new students in, but I can help you keep them. And, you know, with the number of students that we accommodate, you know, and the students who are coming to us, especially through COVID, you know, we have had a good number of our students who are impacted by COVID. And the university, through a lot of resources, you know, recognizing we know our students really well. We know our students needed this. They need some resources. How do we do that? And so, you know, we need to, you know, show that the investment that they make, that, you know, in, you know, whether it's our disability services advisors who work with with the students on accommodations and work with our faculty to my accessibility and usability team, then this is a worthwhile investment, and this is how we're going to turn that around. And it's being really strategic about some of those conversations and not just coming back with a snappy answer, but really trying to understand where is the objection and how can I get to that root cause so that I can address it so that you can fully trust what it is that we're asking you to do.
Thank you. Team Merck, how have the employees reacted that don't right now need an accommodation? I should say yet.
So Steve, I don't know if you want to take it from the digital accessibility.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, just to follow up on what you were saying, Kelly, that it's really having that understanding that when you design for accessibility, you're just making a better product. So we have the curb cut analogy where, which I'm sure, many may be familiar with, where the sidewalk meets the street and it helps folks in wheelchairs, but it really helps also people with strollers. And if they have a dolly and they're moving something, and if, I can think of other personal reasons why I benefited from the curb cut after running a marathon. So it's one of those things that universal design, when you're designing for accessibility, you're just making a better product, period. Now, yes, you have to be practical. You have to be practical in terms of your budget, and you can't fix everything all at once, but you can prioritize those most critical features. You have a website, and hopefully you're gathering metrics and analytics on the traffic of your website to understand which pages get the most traffic, where are the biggest areas of low-hanging fruit opportunity to fix, and start there. Like any product, there is a roadmap of enhancements. Put it on the backlog of enhancements and incorporate that into the regular releases of whatever that product is. So I think it's interesting. It's never going to go away. I think about a few years ago when responsive design was relatively new. So basically creating your web-enabled products and services so that they can, properly render on any sort of device, whether it's a laptop, a tablet, or a mobile phone. And having worked in the digital marketing agency at the time, that was very much a value. That was additional. That wasn't baked into, the regular offering. It was something that had to be specially done. And I'm hopeful for today, everything has to be responsive because we're on so many different devices. It's no longer a novelty. It's no longer an extra. It's part of the body of knowledge of how to do digital, period. And I'm hopeful that digital accessibility will go the same way, where that body of knowledge is part of the training of the next generation of user experience designers and visual designers and developers. This is just part of their training. And we'll have to benefit from that because then everything will be coded. Accessibility will be baked in. One of the things that we're doing at Merck is working with not a new platform, but a new instance of the WordPress VIP platform. And for the templates and themes, baking into it accessibility. And so now, does that going to cover everything? No, it's not. But at least it's a good step in the right direction. So I think it's really about, as we continue this journey, it is a rising tide. And in order for engineers and technologists to stay relevant, to stay in business, this is a capability, this is a practice that is part of their canon, so to speak. So
yeah, and the other thing I would add is that, Steve, if you think about where we were 2 years ago, people are talking about this now we're not pushing them to this topic. They're coming to us. They have ideas. I think about something as simple as closed captioning. We offered that during our employee business briefing with our CEO, and today we translate into 19 languages. So everyone around the world can enable captioning in their native language. We are doing things very differently than we did years ago. Video content that gets posted to our external sites is always captioned now. That wasn't a standard before, but it's a standard today. So it's exciting, for us, because it used to be us bringing up the topic and trying to push the agenda, and now people are coming to us. They are absorbing this like a sponge, and they want more and more information.
Yeah, Nora, you've used the analogy of pushing the boulder up the hill,
Yes.
but now I think it's gone over the hill and we're actually trying to catch up with the boulder.
Very true.
That would be good news. Nora, you brought up your CEO, and that leads to a really important question, I think. What's the role of the C-suite in either being champions of this idea, or how do you get around them if they're the challenge?
Yes, I think you need executive sponsorship, but I don't know that you need necessarily the CEO or the C-suite. You just need to have someone that has the influence. We certainly have support, but when you think about their roles and the kinds of things that they're dealing with on a day-to-day, it's important to have sponsorship across the organization. And so, one way that we were able to get sponsorship, and this is how I actually met Steve, the person that was the executive for our built environment. He had responsibility for, I think, 300 million square feet of space or something enormous. And he had come up with, his team had come up with a universal design framework that we're applying around the world. And so we knew digital was the next priority for us, and we wanted to move on it and replicate what we learned from the built environment. And so he happened to have a conversation with the chief information officer, and they were talking about facilities and locations for his employees. And he mentioned about digital accessibility in his one-on-one. He immediately gave him the name of someone we could speak to. And it was through that person that I met Steve. And I say it often in internal forums, external forums. The day I met him, everything changed, because he saw the value of adding accessibility into the framework that he had developed for the company for digital governance. And it wasn't put underneath D&I, it was its own attribute, and that made the difference. So that's what you need. I mean, you need allies. I think sponsorship is important to a certain degree, but you need allies.
Yeah, and maybe just to kind of briefly describe enterprise digital governance, essentially it's a framework that enhances the connection between all the global support functions and the business. So global support functions meaning cybersecurity, data privacy, pharmacovigilance, drug safety, corporate branding, common voice, patient insights, things that are more around optimizing things, metrics and analytics. And this is where digital accessibility in its own right, fit right in there. So, and it's really taking all these different functions that a company has, most companies have this, and connecting that, helping that connection to the business. So that's what enterprise digital governance is. And because with such a large company, it's so easy to work in silos, and for one support function to put up a policy and then sit back and watch everyone ignore it. So it's really enabling the support functions to better connect with the business and vice versa.
Kelly, I don't want to let you off the hook here because, you mentioned that Phoenix really did this, brought you on because of an external factor, pressure from outside. And I'm sure companies are always worried about that pressure from the outside. I won't use the litigious words, but tell me a little bit what you think about the importance of having the president of an institution, the principal of a high school get behind this rather than just having it be led by some well-intentioned staff.
I think it can, depending on your organization, make or break it. And, I've worked, in lots of different, 3 different institutions of higher ed, very, very different, all 3 of them, and doing this work. And one of my biggest concerns when I took the job here at Phoenix was a few months after I got here, it was announced that our president was stepping down and we were getting a new one. And, having gone through that change before multiple times, at different institutions, I knew what that meant. It was, yes, some of the driving force behind, creating an inaccessibility initiative was, because of this external, resolution agreement that we had. But, we actually were taking some really good steps to do it the right way, which was something I was very grateful for. As I joke with folks, it worked out pretty well for me in terms of, coming here for this position, but I've really been giving a lot of freedom and a lot of latitude to construct it and, to really take what it is that we do and build accessibility into it in a way that is not very compliance driven. And so, having a new president come on board, it's like, okay, now what, right? And what's going to happen? And I'm very, very grateful, to say that not only is our new president, well, he's not really so much new. He's been here, just a few months shorter than I have, but 4 years at this point. He gets it. He understands, the importance of what it is that we do from an accessibility perspective. And I'd like to think that, some of the way that we've been able to garner the support of not only, Peter, our president, and John, our provost, but the rest of our C-suite has been in the information that we share. We do a quarterly update meeting with all of our leaders. Our leaders across the, university are included to this meeting where it's our C-suite members, it's, vice presidents across, all, parts of the organization. And we share information about what we're seeing from our students with disabilities, what we're seeing from an accessibility and usability perspective, what our educational equity office is doing, and the insights that we're learning from that. And it's not just me as a talking head talking about the work of the team, but my team presents, and they're sharing some insights that they have, and we're keeping them informed and we're keeping it top of mind. And that's really, really important, because we have the responsibility to drive this across the university, but we also have that responsibility to build those relationships and to let folks know how it fits into their vertical, so that we can start to break down those silos and be looked at as a resource across the university. And I think that we've been very successful with that. That doesn't mean that, when we were more in person than we are now, and we had a full, fledged cafeteria, that, I, didn't experience, our president coming up to me and saying, "Hey, Kelly, what's going on with this tool?" I'm like, "Oh, you're on the lunch line. You want me to talk about you're not going to like what I said, what I have to say." But, but he does, he wants to hear from me. And, there have been other times where, we've had to, really quickly hurry up and get an accessibility evaluation done because it was a high priority thing. And, he will, ask me how it went. And we have, core values at the university of being brave, honest, and focused. And I'm like, "Do you want me to give you the real answer, or do you want me to kind of PC it up a little bit?" He goes, "No, I want the real answer." And he does. He generally wants me to tell him what's going well and what's not going well. And, he's been a great person, for me to be able to not only share those updates with and say, "This is how I'm approaching it, and this is how we're moving forward with this. Do you support that? Would you like me to change my approach?" And, most of the time we're consistent in terms of how we approach it. And then he delivers that message as well of support across the university to say, "This is important," or he'll highlight something that my team has done, in a way that's been, really amazing for us to be able to showcase some of the work across the university. And to, because that raises that specter of awareness, that when, folks stop and think about it, they'll hear a story of a student, who mentions, hey, I happen to work with a disability services advisor. Those are organic things that, we didn't orchestrate that, but, it's highlighting, how important this is for those real people who, build up our most important stakeholder. And for us, that's the students.
Yeah, I think what makes both of these organizations standouts to me as an outsider is this is baked into your DNA.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't an add-on, or it's not something that is at risk when your CEO leaves. I mean,
Yeah.
Merck's going to go through that shortly, right? Or hopefully University of Phoenix isn't. I hope Peter's there forever. But I mean, this is what makes a difference. It's not one person's jihad. It's
Yeah.
everybody's journey. And both organizations have really described this as a journey. So that really sets up my final question, which is, you're both such leaders, both institutions, such leaders in this field. What's next? What do you think has to happen next to really expand full access, of diverse people at your institution, and then do a little 101 on what happens to happen in the rest of the world?
So each year we set our annual priorities, and we use an external index to help us shape those priorities. It's an index that is known as the Disability Equality Index, and they raise the bar year over year in terms of what they're hoping to see companies achieve. And so that helps part of what's next for us, because we look at where we have a gap, and then we begin to develop our priorities around addressing that gap. The one thing, and it's not related to accessibility as much as it's related to disability inclusion, that we're beginning to work on, and we're at the very early stages of this. But we're beginning to look at neurodivergent talent, and we are partnering with an external partner who recommended that we do this collaboration to hire more talent on the spectrum into roles that they were under contract with us to provide services. So we did this pilot back in the latter part of last year, and we made our first hire in March, and we're really excited about it. The other thing, that we're doing is that we're continuing to build stronger external partnerships with our suppliers. And we've set an expectation with our suppliers that they are going to recruit and hire persons with disabilities if they're going to service our contracts. And I call it our inclusion rider. I think we tried to copy CAD off of Hollywood, but it's made a huge difference. The other thing that we've tackled through this inclusion rider is that we are also attracting talent that is intellectually, developmentally disabled. And it's a population that often gets neglected. And they're not, there aren't as many companies focused on recruiting from this talent pool. We have entered into partnerships with organizations like Best Buddies to help us source talent so that we can include them in the work that we're doing to really create economic inclusion, as I mentioned earlier today. So if I would say, what's next for us? We want to think about the community of people with disabilities and where we can do better. How can we educate ourselves? What can we learn? What can we change so that we can have more people coming to us who want to work for Merck?
I'm so thrilled to hear that you're going into the neurodiversity sphere. Such an incredible talent pool there that has been totally underutilized. And just to throw out a statistic before I ask Kelly to talk about what's next for the University of Phoenix in this space, the unemployment rate in the world of disabilities is 80%.
Yep.
And I cannot believe that the vast majority of those talented individuals couldn't hold a job and do it well.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important, statistic to throw out, Jane. And, also I know that I don't, have statistics off the top of my head, but also the underemployed rate of individuals with disabilities is also, staggeringly high. And so I think, any place where we can, influence that, metric and start getting these folks, to work, and, in jobs, that leverages their talents and abilities is really important. But what's next for the University of Phoenix? I think, in terms of, we need to leverage our position as a leader in higher education, especially in online education. We've been having lots of coordinated conversations and planning towards, as I mentioned earlier, how we can infuse accessibility principles into our curriculum so that we're preparing our graduates, to come out of with their degrees and with the skills that they need to be able to make a difference in their companies as they work to develop, accessible digital products and tools and resources. And so that is, definitely something that is on our radar and what we're looking at, not just within our degree programs, but also in our professional development course offerings as well. And so, our goal is, to move forward on that as quickly as we can, keeping in mind that, Rome wasn't built in a day, so to be able to continue to do that work and to engage our stakeholders, to move forward with that. On our diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging front, I think it's important, to note that, we're a large organization as well. And, we're grappling with a lot of folks who are doing a lot of really amazing work and that we don't really know everything that's happening, within, the confines of the University of Phoenix, organization. And so, we have a lot of work that we're doing right now with stakeholders across the university to pinpoint what is that work, where can we leverage that work, where do we have opportunities to grow that work. And, Peter Cohen, who is our president, has said to the university community that, he really feels that diversity needs to be infused throughout our organization, that it's not as important to, create a vertical within the cabinet for a chief diversity officer, because he really sees that responsibility as lying with him as the university president. He sets the tone and, he needs to, to make sure that we all understand at the university that this is important, and this is important for us. It's important for our students who are, 60% underrepresented, in terms of the demographic categories that you look at. And it's an important thing that, we need to infuse across our organization. And it's not just a responsibility of one office and where the buck stops with him, but it also, it lies with all of us. And so I'm really excited because I think, things not only like this webinar series and partnering with Merck and with WorkingNation to bring this together, there are so many other things that we're looking to do and to leverage our position as, as I said, a leader in higher education to, raise that awareness and make a difference, between thought leadership and how we can get more students, to degrees and be able to help them on their career journeys, as they career with confidence is really, really important. So I think you're going to see, some, pretty amazing things coming from the University of Phoenix. And, quite frankly, I'm biased, but I think that's okay.
Well, I think your students and your whole university community should be so proud of your courage in taking a leadership role here. I know we lost Steve, but I think he came back on phone in case he has something that he wants to add there. Maybe we lost him by phone too. I just can't thank you enough. Nora, Steve in absentia, Kelly, what a fabulous discussion. And I hand it back to Andrea to close us out.
Thank you, Jane, and what an incredible job you did as our moderator today. So thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. As I mentioned at the start of our webinar, we are going to post this on our blog. That address is phoenix.edu/blog. And I hope you all take some time to visit the blog and download this recording and share it with others. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.